What's going on, everybody? Today I'm coming to you with another KeyForge deck analysis. Today I'm going to be breaking down this deck right here called the Citizen of Thronemarch. We're going to be taking a look at this deck in closer detail. What we're going to be doing is taking a look at every single card that comes in here, as well as some of the synergies and combos that can help you win games. I will say this. Out of the two decks I got at Gen Con, this one wins a little bit more often than not, so I think this is the more powerful of the two decks, and we're going to take a look at why that is. You may see some cards you haven't seen before as well, because we're going to be breaking down every single card in here. Now, if you are new to the channel, I would invite you to subscribe so you don't miss any of the other content that I have. I tend to cover a lot of Fantasy Flight games, including X-Wing, Armada, Star Wars Legion, just about anything Star Wars related, as well as a lot of other board games as well. So I encourage you to subscribe and check out all the content I have to offer. But as far as KeyForge is concerned, let's dive right in. So I have our deck now broken apart and sorted by faction and type, and here is our master card here that kind of shows us Untamed, Shadows, and Logos are our factions here, as well as on the back we have our QR code and full deck list. You're going to get 12 cards of each type, and I have sorted by artifacts on this far line. Then I also have actions in the middle line here, and then creatures here, and then off to the right I have upgrades. Upgrades and artifacts are two of the most rarest types, and I've only got one upgrade in the whole deck, and that is for our Untamed faction. So let's go ahead and look at the cards by faction. Alright, so the first card we're going to talk about is our one upgrade, and this is an Untamed upgrade called Way of the Bear. First off, when we play it, we're going to gain an Amber, and it gives any creature it goes on Assault 2, which it tells you what that does. Before the creature attacks, you deal 2 damage to the attacked enemy, which is very, very nice. It's just basically an upfront additional 2 damage to whoever they attack. Great for attacking creatures. I think this one will synergize very well with our Shadows faction cards, which a lot of them are based on attacking. A lot of them have fight and steal keywords where you want them to attack anyway. And it's just a great opportunity for you to beef up creatures that you want to attack. Now, there are some other creatures in here that are good for attacking, so let's take a look at our creatures for Untamed. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 creatures, so not too many Untamed creatures, but it's not a bad number. Alright, so we're going to have Murmuk here. Murmuk is a big crab, so naturally I love this creature. This is already my favorite creature in the game, just because it's a giant crab. The only thing that could make it better is if it had nunchucks. So it's got a power of 3, which is reasonable. Anything with more than 2 is a little bit more easy to survive. But he has this awesome ability. It says your opponent's keys cost +1 amber. So for every Murmuk that's out, it's going to increase the cost of your opponent's keys from 6 to 7, or then perhaps to 8 if you have 2 of them out. But we only have 1 of those in this deck. Next up is going to be Big Twig. Big Twig is the strongest creatures I've ever seen. He's a strength of 7, and Big Twig can only fight stunned creatures. Stun is one of the cards that you will actually get in the core set, a little marker that says when they're stunned, that basically their next action, all they can do is unstun. But when you reap with him, you can stun and exhaust a creature. So basically, he's a creature that's going to do a little bit of 2 different things. He's going to be reaping and then stunning somebody, and then the next turn he has the option to go ahead and attack that stunned creature. So that's a kind of a nice, you have a couple of options with him. And I like this guy because you can play him 2 different ways. You can play him as a reaper who's just going to be reaping and stunning and exhausting the other person's creatures, or you could then also go out and kill creatures after you have them stunned, or you could just keep reaping. So he could definitely kind of control the party. We have a Hunting Witch. A Hunting Witch is only a power of 2, but each time you play another creature, gain 1 amber. That's a very, very, very good card to have, although its synergy is not super, super strong in this deck. This is a card that's going to work really well if you have a lot of Untamed creatures. This is a card you may want to mulligan to force yourself to try to have this in your opening hand, because you could potentially play, like if I had all 4 of these of my creatures in my opening hand, then I might want to play this one first and then play the other creatures. But outside of that, it's harder because we're very creature heavy on certain other factions in this deck, and we're not that creature heavy on Untamed. Now, if you can play this first turn and your opponent manages not to kill it, then your second turn could be a very, very big, a big power turn. So it's kind of a gamble. I think this is a card I might consider playing first turn if I have a lot of creatures from maybe another faction, like Shadows, for example. Then I might want to play that first turn. But with only 2 health, it definitely runs the risk of getting killed on your opponent's first turn. Next up is Dust Pixie. The Dust Pixie is only a 1 power creature, very, very weak, but it gives you 2 amber when you play it. So that's huge. 2 amber is really, really nice. And, and it's a creature that can still reap. And, it doesn't have any special abilities, but I like the idea of gaining 2 amber just by playing that creature. All right, now let's look at our actions, because we do have a lot of actions. Let's see. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 actions in this deck. So let's take a look at them. All right. Now, as we've seen, the theme for a lot of Untamed is kind of like green mana, very about growth, and very dedicated to gaining you amber. So a lot of their cards are going to have amber symbols on them. Now this one reminds me of the old classic green spell Fog. It's 1 amber you gain when you play it, and also your opponent cannot use their creatures to fight on their next turn. This is a great card when your opponent has a lot of creatures, especially all of the same faction. This will stop them from attacking with them. Next up is Key Charge. I talked about this one in my last one because this was also present in my other deck. This is perhaps maybe the most powerful card in the game in that it allows you to lose an amber first, and then if you do, you may forge a key at current cost. The current cost is always going to be 6 unless something is modifying it. For example, maybe that creature that we showed before, the Murmok, would increase the current cost of your opponent's keys. So that's what current cost means. It's generically it's 6, but some things can modify it. But what's great about this is that your normal key charge step where you're forging a key is at the beginning of your turn. So this can potentially, if you gain a whole lot of amber, maybe you play that little pixie, you gain a bunch more amber. If you have 7, you could potentially play this, lose 1, forge a key at 6, and win the game, even when your opponent expected that you weren't going to be able to, because normally you have to check, and your opponent has 1 chance to reduce your amber before you go ahead and forge a key. So this one is a really, really a great card to have. We only have 1 of them in this deck, so you'll have to be very judicious on when you use it. Grasping Vines. This one gives us 1 amber when we play it. And it says, when you play this card, it's an action, you can return up to 3 artifacts to their owner's hands. This one's got limited use because there's not that many artifacts that really need to go back to their owner's hands. Or there's really not that many artifacts in the game. There are a few, but if your opponent has an artifact-heavy deck, this one will be really, really useful. But even if the thing is, it's an up to, so you have some flexibility. If your opponent only has 1, that's fine. Well, I'll still gain the amber. So like cards that gain you an amber are good to play regardless. We have another Fog Bank. I meant to have that one next to it. So we have 2 Fog Banks, the one that stops your opponent from attacking. We have Lost in the Woods. Lost in the Woods, I think, was in our other deck as well. This one lets you choose 2 friendly creatures and 2 enemy creatures, and you shuffle each of them into their owner's deck. It's a limited usability card because of the fact that you have to have 2 creatures out, and your opponent has to have 2 creatures out, at least. Other than that, you can't do it. It has to have the targets. So, if it was up to 2, then it would be great, because you could just end up putting 2, of your opponent's creatures back into their deck. But in this case, it's limited how useful it is, because you're also having to get rid of 2 of your own creatures, which usually you would rather have out. There's always that case where there's a creature you kind of want to put back into your deck. Like this one could be very useful towards the end of, like, if you're about to run out of cards in your deck and you want to put 2 of the same faction back in there, so you end up having, like, maybe you can engineer it to where you have 6 cards all of the same faction and you have a real power turn. This can help you do that, but overall, I'm not a big fan of this card just because it's limited on how much it can be used. It does have its really great use cases, but it's harder to use. Then we have Vigor. We have 2 copies of Vigor, and Vigor lets you gains you an amber and lets you heal up to 3 damage from a creature. If you healed 3 damage, you gain 1 amber. So you're gaining 1 amber automatically, but if you actually able to use it to its most efficient level and fully heal 3 damage, you're going to gain an extra amber. In other words, if a creature only has 2 damage on it, you wouldn't gain that extra amber. And that is all of our untamed cards. All right, next is going to be Shadows, and I think this is one of the things that makes this deck powerful and makes it very successful, at least in the games that I have played so far. I've got 7 Shadows creatures, and the Shadows creatures are particularly nasty, and a lot of them are hard to kill. So I think that's one thing that makes this deck strong, because if you're able to get a lot of Shadows creatures out, you can continue to reap and gain the amber with them by just choosing Shadows over and over again. As opposed to actions, which are usually a one and done thing. Creatures can stay out and continue to be useful. I think creatures are definitely very strong in this game, and I think the Shadows creatures that I have in this deck are very nasty. So, we're going to start off with Dodger. Now we have 2 copies of Dodger. So, Dodger is a rarity amongst the Shadows. The Shadows usually have weaker creatures that are hard to kill. Dodger is a strong creature. He's got 5 power to him. And he's also got the ability of fight and stealing one. So another thing with Shadows is they like to steal. They're all about taking things away from you and giving it to themselves. So Dodger is going to fight. If he survives the fight, he then gets to steal one. That's what the fight ability is. After you attack with them, you have to survive, and then you can trigger their fight condition, or their fight reward. So he'll steal one. Now with power 5, he has a pretty good chance of surviving the fight. And there's 2 of them. So he is a very nice creature, and he's kind of hard to kill because of his high power. Next up we have Urchin. So Urchin is a much weaker character, more in line with what Shadows is. Shadows usually has weaker creatures, but he's elusive. So the first time you attack him, he's not going to take any damage, which is excellent. And that's what you need for weaker creatures. And then when you play him, you get to steal one. So he doesn't even have to do anything. Once he's out, you've already got his benefit. He's somebody like you get their benefit right away. You don't have to wait till next turn and hope they survive. Next is Umbra. Umbra is a power 2, again, pretty weak. And Umbra has Skirmish. When you use this creature to fight, it is dealt no damage in return. So Skirmish, think of Skirmish as almost like a ranged attack or first strike. I like the idea of a ranged attack better. They're attacking you from a distance and they're not taking counterattack damage in the process. Again, which makes him, even though he's weak, he is hard to kill because I'm going to send him out to attack and he's not going to take any damage back. And then after he survives a fight, he will steal one. Again, he'll survive pretty easily because he's not taking any damage when he attacks. You'll have Bad Penny. Bad Penny is actually really cool. She is only a 1 power, but when she's destroyed, she goes back to your hand, which is really useful if you're going to continue to declare Shadows over and over again. You can just keep resummoning her over and over again every turn. And if she doesn't get destroyed, you can just reap with her or even attack, and she'll go back to your hand and you can summon her again. There's so much to this creature that synergizes with this deck because of the fact that they're stronger on creatures than the other factions. She works very, very well with that and allows for some excellent combos of just continuing to do Shadows over and over. Old Bruno, who is a little bit stronger, he's a 3 power, and he is elusive, so the first time you attack him, he's not going to take damage. But when you play him, you capture 3. Now, capture is different than steal. Capture just holds it on the card, and then once he's killed, it'll go back to the opponent. But 3 is a really nice way, especially if your opponent's had a power turn and they're up to like 8 amber, for example, you can bring them down to 5. Smiling Ruth, another creature. She is elusive, which means, again, the first time you attack her, she's not going to take damage. And when you reap, she has, if you forge the key this turn, take control of an enemy flank creature. Now, that's a very an ability that isn't going to be used all that often because it's just so powerful, taking control of an enemy flank creature. A flank creature is a creature that's on the outside. So again, in this game, when you deploy a creature, they have to go on the outside. You can't deploy them in between 2 other creatures. But she can potentially take control of a creature. Now, it's only going to work on terms that you have forged a key and that she's, available to reap. But if that works out, taking control of a creature is really, really strong. So people will definitely try to kill her. But then again, she is elusive. So usually your opponent will send a spell to try to kill her. Speaking of spells, or actions rather, we'll go ahead and talk about, we only have 2 actions for Shadows. But they're strong actions. So we'll start off with Miasma. Miasma, first off, it's going to give you an amber, which is always great. And when you play it, your opponent skips their forge a key step on the next turn. Again, that's how they forge their key. That's how they get one of the 3 keys required to win the game. So making them skip that step is a great way to stall if you don't have enough ways to steal from them If they've got 6 and you just can't steal right now, well, you can just slow them down. Again, this is one of the things that makes that key charge card so strong, because they can still forge a key even outside of their forge a key step if they have that. Next up is Poison Wave, one of my favorite actions. This one is going to deal 2 damage to each creature. This will hurt your own, but you can play this before you summon all of your creatures. And also with cards like Bad Penny, they're going to come back to your hand anyway, so just go ahead and reap with her, then play this, kill her, then replay her again. You know, it's just, there's the synergies here. The shadows are really what makes this deck so strong. There's some really, really great cards. And now we have artifacts. We actually have 3 artifacts, which are interesting in this deck, because we don't usually have that many artifacts based on what I've seen, but we have 2 copies of Subtle Maul. The Subtle Maul is an action that's going to make your opponent discard a random card from their hand. Now, I will tell you, I don't like this card. I don't like forcing people to discard, because I believe that is one of those things that can create a negative play experience if abused. However, considering that this isn't a deck that I built, this is a deck that came pre-assembled, I'm okay with it, because this isn't something that I've done deliberately to troll you. And there's a number of other things to limit the use of this. Even if I'm able to get 2 of these out, which would potentially create a little bit of a hard time for a player if somebody was using these, they can only use them on turns that they're declaring shadows. So eventually they're going to have to go Untamed or Logos. So you know, they're not going to be able to just keep making you discard and making you play at a disadvantage over and over again. They're going to eventually run out of chances to use these. But this could, if you got both of these out, you could really ruin your opponent's day. Now, the fact that if this were a customizable card game, somebody could, you know, put the maximum amount of these in here and just keep doing that over and over again and really, you know, create a negative play experience. So I'm glad that there's ways to deal with artifacts. And our last artifact is the Skeleton Key, and that one, as an action, friendly creature captures 1 amber. So capturing is nice. This is just another type of denial to slow your opponent down from forging a key. Not too strong, but it is pretty interesting. So now let's take a look at Logos. Alright, so we've got our Logos creatures. Now we only start with 4 creatures from Logos, so a little bit lighter on the creatures, but not too bad. Again, our Shadows is where we're heaviest on creatures, so we're okay to be a little bit lighter on other factions. Now the Logos, it was not present in my last deck, so this is my only deck with Logos, and they seem like they're all about control and denial, like a little bit of like blue magic. You know, combined with a couple of other things, but a little bit of hints of blue magic with the denial and the control. So first off, you have the Titan Mechanic. Now, when Titan Mechanic is on a flank, each key costs -1 amber. This is a dangerous card. This is basically reducing the costs of all keys, and this isn't just for you. This is also for your opponent. So the Titan Mechanic is going to make keys cheaper for everybody, so you have to be very careful about how you use this. This is a card you would probably want to play maybe right after your opponent forged a key already, or when they had no amber, and you were close to being able to forge one. This would be a nice one. This could also combo into a turn where you're planning on having something like 10 amber the following turn, and you wanted to forge a key and then potentially play like Key Charge to forge a second key. This could combo into maybe a game-winning 1-2 2-turn combo. All right, next up is Novu Archaeologist. This one will let you, he's a 4 power, and yeah, the Titan Mechanic was 6 power too, that was crazy, it's really strong. The Novu Archaeologist is power 4. As an action, you can archive a card from your discard pile. When you archive a card, you're kind of removing it from the game, but you'll get to draw it on the next turn, so this helps set up a power turn, and it gets you a card back. Next up is Quixo the Adventurer, and yeah, if you're familiar, that's actually Brad Andrus on the cover there. He's I believe the lead developer for KeyForge, so that's kind of cool. And I should have had him sign this at Gen Con. I got to meet him, and I did not have a Sharpie on me, but I would have totally gotten him to sign this card. So this is a 3 power card, and it has Skirmish. So when you're attacking, you're dealt no damage in return. And after he fights, you get to draw a card. Again, really helping set up power combos. This is a great support control faction. I really like the mechanics in this faction. Next up we have Dr. Escotera. Dr. Escotera is a power 4. These creatures are kind of strong, if you'll notice, at least when you compare them to like the Shadows creatures. When you play this, you gain an amber for each forged key your opponent has. So he's kind of helping play catch up. So you could potentially get 2 amber when you play this guy, or potentially none if you played him early. So he's obviously somebody you want to play a little bit later in the game. So now we're going to look at actions. First off, we're going to talk about this as a powerful card. This is the first card that I have seen that actually gives you a chain. So we're going to talk about Effervescent Principle. When you play Effervescent Principle, each player loses half of their amber, rounding down the loss. You gain 1 chain. So this is a card that's ideal after you've forged a key and your opponent is close to forging a key. There's a lot of ways you can do this. You can use this as a last-ditch effort to stop your opponent, because the more amber they have, the more they're going to lose, but so will you. So you have to make sure, like, this is really good if your opponent plays like a 3 amber card first turn and then you go next and you start with 3. So you'll only lose 1 amber, but they'll lose 3. But it gives you a chain, so you're going to draw 1 less card at the end of that turn if you have no chains already. Or if you've already got chains, it's going to add 1 more onto that. Now this deck is actually going to come with 3 copies of Effervescent Principle. So this is just a really strong way to make sure you're controlling the game and keeping your opponent from getting too much amber. You just have to play it at the right time. Next up, we have Phase Shift, one of the most awesome cards in this game. Phase Shift, when you play this, you may play 1 non-Logos card this turn. That is huge, because this, like we were talking about setting up for the power turn, this has like blue mana written all over it, how it's changing the rules of the game and giving you the ability to do something that you normally couldn't do. You can, you know, and it's just amazing. So you can play 1 non-Logos card this turn. Huge. All right, so next up is Fogify. We're going to gain 1 amber by playing that. Your opponent cannot use creatures to fight on their next turn. Did I say opponent? Sounded a little strange there. I don't know why it came out like that. Your opponent cannot use creatures to fight on their next turn. We've seen this is very similar to that other fog spell that we had in the other one. And then Interdimensional Graft, we've got, this will give us 1 amber. You're going to play this one. If an opponent forges a key on their next turn, they must give you their remaining amber. For when somebody, this is great if you combo this after you make your opponent skip their forge a key step, and they've already got like 6 or 7. They're going to gain some more. They're going to gain a lot more, and you can just be like, all right, good. You know, give me all of your extra amber. That's just huge. It has the potential to be huge, but it's not always going to be great. It's one of those that could, if you play it at the right time, you could gain a lot, but if you don't play it at the right time, you could really gain virtually nothing. And then Remote Access, again, another very, very much feeling like blue mana from Magic the Gathering. Use an opponent's artifact as if it were your own with Remote Access here. Again, you're going to gain an amber when you play that. But just being able to use somebody else's stuff, especially like, you know, a card, an artifact that makes you discard, or an artifact that returns, you know, things. Speaking of artifacts, here's the one we have for this faction called Spangler Box. And as an action, you can purge a creature in play. Purge is to remove them from the game entirely. If you do, your opponent gains control of Spangler Box. If Spangler Box leaves play, return all cards purged by Spangler Box. So this is a fun card. I don't know how competitive it is, and I'm very reluctant to use this card in a lot of games, just because they gain control of it, and now all of a sudden, you know, they're having a real hard time trying to use it. Now the strength of this card is that if your opponent does not have Logos in their deck, because in order for them to use this card, they would have to declare Logos as a faction, which means they're doing nothing else. If you've got Logos, you can declare Logos as a faction, use this card, and also play other cards. So now, a little-known rule is you're not bound by only being able to declare one of the 3 houses on your deck. You can declare any house, but the thing is, there's no reason for you to do that, because you're not going to control a card of another player. However, Logos is the one faction that seems like it's going to change that by just messing with the game and changing things up. So this is a really interesting card, because now it'll go to your opponent. Your opponent's like, well, now I've got a Logos card, but I was going to do this big, you know, Shadows turn. Do I want to declare Logos, and the only thing I can do is that? Because chances are maybe they'll just purge the Spangler Box itself and free the creatures that are inside of it. Or maybe they'll get one of your power creatures, and then it goes back and forth and back and forth. There's a lot of really interesting things that can happen with Spangler Box, and I think it's more of a fun card than a competitive card, but I do like it. I like cards that are fun. I like games that are fun, and this deck is very strong, and a lot of it has to do with the combinations that are in there, but I like that it's got some fun in it too. So this is the whole deck. It is the Citizen of Thronemarch. Let me know what you guys think of this deck, and let me know if you want to see some battles and some games coming soon. There's a couple more people in my area that do have some decks, so I'm going to try to schedule some games against some all-new decks here in the near future while we wait for the release of KeyForge. If you like this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Don't forget to check out Crabbok.com and stay tuned for more. Don't forget to subscribe and click that little bell for alerts so you don't miss out on any of the new content. I want to thank you guys so much for watching, and have a great day.